Hello and welcome back to the Better Brain Blueprint. I'm so excited to share today's episode with you because we're going to be discussing one of the quickest, most effective, and most powerful ways to improve your brain function. You'll learn how, with just a few simple steps, you can dramatically enhance things like memory and cognition, focus and attention. So what are we talking about? We're discussing the mind-blowing power of sleep to heal our brains. Now, as we get started talking about the value of sleep for brain health, I'd like to begin with just a couple of really incredible sleep statistics. First, we should recognize that as time goes on, we as a population have been getting less and less quality sleep. In fact, around a third of Americans report they get less than the recommended 7 hours of sleep each night. This helps to explain why so many of us feel constantly fatigued, with low energy and foggy thinking. And if you think the only downside to poor sleep is just feeling a little bit more tired, you need to think again. Missing out on sleep quality is like leaving money on the table, because getting even one night of better sleep may be the most rapid way to supercharge your overall brain function. In this episode, we'll hear from some of the leading experts on the topic of sleep and brain health. We'll learn why exactly sleep is so important to how we think and feel, and we'll cover in depth some of the biggest reasons why so many of us struggle to get good shut-eye, and why something as small as where you charge your phone at night can make such a big difference in your sleep quality. As always, I promise we'll spend plenty of time addressing exactly what to do with all this science, including simple steps that each of us can take to get better sleep starting tonight. We'll also address the key question of who might benefit from getting more professional care for their sleep issues, including the role of a sleep study. I am Dr. Austin Perlmutter, and this is the Better Brain Blueprint.
Having a healthier brain feels empowering.
Limitless.
Inspiring.
It feels peaceful and it feels hopeful.
It is so essential to your health.
Your brain is your greatest asset.
Improve your brain.
Improve your brain.
Improve your brain.
Improve your life.
Improve your life.
There is no alternative.
Live better longer.
You deserve that.
In this episode, we'll be covering powerful, life-changing information. Remember, if you want full access to the Better Brain Blueprint now and for years to come, you can invest in the entire series, along with the exclusive bonus materials right now for a special price that is only available during this broadcast. Don't wait. Your brain will thank you. With so many health fads on TV, the internet, and magazines, you might be wondering whether the recent focus on sleep is a little bit overblown. Well, the research suggests that this is absolutely not the case. The science is clear. Sleep is one of the most important and underappreciated variables for brain health.
I think it's really quite clear that the world in which we find ourselves these days is really a world that is not favorable in terms of the brain's destiny. In our modern world, we aren't sleeping enough, and sleep is underrated. We should spend a third of our lives asleep. Not getting enough restorative sleep is hugely detrimental to the future of the brain.
Sleep is this magical time where we sort of metabolically reboot and clean out a lot of the waste products from our metabolic processes during the day.
There's a really tight connection between our sleep quality and our mental well-being. And sleep impacts everything. It impacts our risk for dementia, it impacts our health span and our lifespan, it impacts our risk of dying in a traffic accident fatality, but also cognitive efficiency, our ability to be resourceful problem solvers, to be patient or kind or empathetic. But it also impacts our mental health. And oftentimes I'll encounter a pushback on that, and someone will say, yeah, but it's my anxiety or it's my depression that is impacting my sleep. And that is also valid, but it is a bi-directional relationship. It's a two-way street. And I've always found that the easier entry point is focusing on sleep first, because if we can improve sleep, this improves every mental health issue under the sun. And the fact that we are all, so many of us, struggling with sleep is specifically related to the modern environment. And I don't blame evolution for not anticipating the plot twist, which is that we were going to learn to harness electricity and invent the light bulb and eventually the iPhone and eventually secession, and then nobody's going to sleep anymore. And so this is what we're up against. And I think that the onus is on us as individuals to flip the script and make sure that we're giving our eyes and therefore our brain the proper light cues.
Sleep is critical for health. It is a fundamental biological need. And if you fight it, you'll lose 100% of the time. I like to say that, as human beings, we really only need to do 3 things. That's eat, move, and sleep.
Many people are living in a sleep deprived state. And I'm not talking about quantity, because many people are like, oh, but Louisa, I'm sleeping, 7.5, 8 hours a night. Some people may be doing that, unless you're a new mother, for example, or a new father. If you're sleeping 7.5 hours a night, that's great. Okay, so we want the quantity there. But then it comes down to quality as well. And that's another form of miseducation. I think we're not really understanding what quality sleep is. And I always refer to sleep as compound interest, right? So we know what compound interest is. You put money in a bank and, certain interest accumulates and you end up making money in the end. Have a think about that in terms of sleep. Let's just say if you sleep, 6 hours in a given night, it might not affect you. Let's just say you sleep 6 hours the following night. That also may not affect you from a brain perspective. But if you sleep 6 hours per night over the span of 10 to 20 years, that is really, really scary because it compounds. We know that when we go into sleep, we activate the glymphatic system, which is a sewage system for your brain. It's basically responsible for going through and clearing out all of the toxic waste that builds up during the day. So if we are not clearing that out every single night, what's going to happen? It's going to compound. You're going to get this accumulation of all of these toxic proteins that just sit in your brain. So do you see how as you get older, everything, just compounds and compounds. And that's why at age 70, or even now, it's even earlier, like 60, 65, we get these complaints. I can't remember where my keys were. The first thing to go in Alzheimer's disease, by the way, is your short-term memory. I can't remember the street name. I can't remember that guy's name. It's the short-term memory, and then it turns into something even more drastic.
So there's 3 aspects of sleep that are important for metabolic health. It's quality, so how much you're like waking up or being just, potentially disturbed while sleeping. Consistency, which is how close, the bedtimes being consistent each night and the wake up times being consistent each night, and then quantity. So how much you're sleeping. And so for me, I was generally getting enough quantity, but bad on consistency. And so that's been something I've really tried to zero in on to improve my metabolic health. I can't overemphasize sleep enough in terms of the metabolic sort of conversation.
As you can see, sleep is so much more than just a way to not feel tired. It's speaking directly to so many aspects of our brain health, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Sleep is a complex and concerted process that impacts so many aspects of our health, from our hormones to our inflammatory state to how we think, act, and feel. The science of sleep is deep and profound. Let's dive in and explore how exactly sleep works, and what does it do to our brains, as well as how our sleep is impacted by things like coffee and alcohol, and why sleep studies are so important.
The moment that you dial in your sleep is the moment that you will dramatically improve the health of your brain. Let's first understand what sleep is. Okay, so sleep is nothing but stages. Okay, and there's 4 stages of sleep. You've got stage 1, which is where you're just falling asleep. Stage 2 is light sleep. So if you hear a big bang, you may wake up during this stage. Then you've got stage 3 and 4, and that's the only 2 that we're really going to focus on here. So stage 3 is known as deep sleep, and or slow wave sleep. And this is where 2 really important things happen. The first thing that happens is you get the release of your hormones. A lot of testosterone is released during that stage, a lot of estrogen for females, but we also release growth hormone. And growth hormone is responsible for protein synthesis, the regeneration of muscle tissue. So it's extremely important that we are getting into deep sleep. We also know that during deep sleep, that's when we get the activation of our glymphatic system. And I mentioned that earlier, clearing out all of the toxic proteins that build up. And by the way, one of the proteins that gets built up during that stage is amyloid beta, which is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So we want to be clearing that out. We want to be flushing the brain out. What happens if we have an amazing deep sleep? Let's just say we've had 3 or 4 hours 4 hours would be a lot, but let's just say we wake up and we've had 3 hours of deep sleep. You're going to wake up feeling clear, that moment of clarity. So you won't have brain fog in the morning. You're going to wake up and you're going to feel excited, and you're going to have enough dopamine reserve. And dopamine is our molecule of, I say, motivation, drive, goal setting. We're going to fundamentally feel excited about the day, vigilant, and be able to move on through the day. So your cognitive functions are going to be at its peak. You're going to be feeling good from a functional perspective. So you're going to be able to have more output through your day. Not just that, I focus on something else, which is not a clinical term, but it's focus endurance. So what I found, and I would say coined this term because a lot of my athletes were like, Louisa, I'm powering from like 7 a.m. till 2 p.m. But then from 2 p.m. onwards, I just can't focus. And that's because their focus reserve is going down because maybe they didn't sleep well, or they haven't had enough water, or they haven't been eating well. So if you want more focus endurance, be able to focus from 7 a.m. till, let's say, 8 p.m., you want to ensure that you are sleeping well. So that's the first part of that. And then you've got REM sleep, stands for rapid eye movement sleep. This is where a lot of our learning and memory consolidation occurs. It's really funny because, I've been in sleep labs and I've overseen, patients that go into sleep, and I watch them on the EEG, and their brain during REM sleep is like it mimics an awake brain. So your mind and brain is really busy during that stage, but you're completely paralyzed, right? So you're not moving. Now, REM sleep should be really made up of 20% of your total sleep time. So if you are getting 20 to 25% of your total sleep time in REM sleep, you're going to be able to learn things better. So whatever you learned the day before, if you're a student, or, it doesn't actually, I think that we should be students for life. It doesn't matter, your age, whatever you learn during that day, if you go to sleep and you're in REM sleep, you're going to remember what you learned that day. So REM sleep is really, really important. And so that's from a functional perspective, but then also from a brain structure perspective, we know that, as we age, the structure of our brain gets thinner. We get thinning of the gray matter cortex, and that's just because we're just aging, and it's one of the brain aging theories. So if we are sleeping and we are cleaning out our brain, you're going to slow the progression of that atrophy as well as we get older.
The question about sleep as it relates to weight or weight management is really important for people to understand. One of the things I like to say is that sleep loss can cancel out weight loss. And I'll just let that sink in for a second, because there's multiple mechanisms for how this works. For example, if you're someone who's sleep deprived, whether it's because you have a disorder like obstructive sleep apnea, or you tend to cut your sleep short to tell yourself you're getting more done during the day, that's a condition where you are increasing your ghrelin hormone from the stomach. That's going to increase your appetite, especially your appetite for salty, fatty, sugary snack foods, especially at night. So ghrelin, the hunger hormone, goes up. Leptin, the satiety hormone, goes down. And that is a recipe for eating. If you're not sleeping well, you're less likely to exercise, you're more sedentary, you're less likely to be motivated to make healthy choices, whether it's about being active or eating. And that also creates a calorie imbalance.
When you don't sleep, the functionality of your brain, how are you focused next day? How's your ability to solve problems? How's your mental energy and fortitude? How's your ability to remember? If you have long-term memory issues, go do a sleep study. Right? That's where you consolidate when you sleep, short to long-term memory. Potentially when you sleep, the sewage system could potentially clean out beta amyloid plaque, these proteins that could lead to brain aging challenges. People don't realize that when you sleep, your brain doesn't shut off. Your brain is actually more active in some ways. And what is it doing? It's like processing and integrating the things that you're focusing on throughout the day. Did you know that Mary Shelley created Frankenstein in her dreams? Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream. A chemist created the framework for the periodic table in his dream. Elias Howe created the sewing machine in his dream. Like, what are we dreaming about? But that requires sleep.
I first want to address the idea of going to get a sleep study. And this is kind of knocking back a fear that I know a lot of people have, which is if I go to get a sleep evaluation, I'm going to get the mask. And this is a very common motion to sort of cover the face with the idea that a CPAP mask is really distasteful. It's hard to kind of picture that as the final common pathway for your sleep evaluation. I want to say that sleep is so critical that it's worthwhile to get tested. And once you get tested and have those results in hand, now you have more power to make an informed choice for yourself. So you have good information about what your sleep is like. If there's a problem, then you can make a choice. Am I going to take steps to fix it, or am I going to just watch and wait for the time being? Those are entirely choices up to the individual being tested. Now, going to get a sleep evaluation most likely will mean having a home sleep apnea test or an in-lab sleep study. And then if obstructive sleep apnea is demonstrated, the most common treatment prescribed and the gold standard for treating obstructive sleep apnea is CPAP or auto-PAP therapy. PAP stands for positive airway pressure. In the case of CPAP, that's continuous positive airway pressure. And now it's common to have auto-PAP prescribed. Auto means the pressure is adjusted up or down by the machine according to what the person needs. So that positive airway pressure acts as a stent to hold the airway open. An important thing to know is that when you have obstructive sleep apnea, it's typically a multi-level obstruction. So this is an advantage that CPAP has as a treatment. That multi-level obstruction is held open by the air pressure. And in that way, you're not having those blockages, you're not having the drops in blood oxygen level, and you can sleep more peacefully. So yes, people who are able to acclimate to CPAP and use it throughout the night experience a 180-degree turn in their sleep, which has a cascade of health effects downstream. There are other treatments for obstructive sleep apnea. In fact, recently I reviewed more than 21 viable treatments doing evidence-based medicine, looking at the different things that would work in different situations. So for the other treatments, there is some match for a particular person based on their sleep apnea severity, their medical history, and possibly some details about their sleep or anatomy that would be relevant. But there are alternatives to CPAP.
One tip in supporting sleep that we don't talk enough about is being mindful of the role of alcohol and blood sugar overnight. And with blood sugar, if you're someone who gets hangry during the day, angry when you're hungry, you're likely also experiencing what's called reactive hypoglycemia overnight. And so if you can be aware of that and start to move in the direction of supporting that, there's a lot of different options. There's things like a ketogenic diet or intermittent fasting to develop better metabolic flexibility.
Other things that you can do are create a lot of contrast between your day and your night. So I'm talking about physical activity, getting lots of exercise during the day, social interactions, making sure you're connecting with somebody, ideally in person, but at the very least in real time through a screen, and also to get your meals on a regular schedule such that you're not eating at wild times. Ideally, it's best to stop eating 3 hours before you go to sleep. So I like people to kind of identify what's going to, when their meal times are going to be to support their sleep patterns too.
When it comes to alcohol, if we could focus just on one pearl of how it's impacting our sleep, I believe it has to do with the fact that we like alcohol partly because it rushes our brain with the neurotransmitter GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, our primary inhibitory neurotransmitter of the central nervous system. Translated to English, it's the neurotransmitter that lets us feel calm, like everything's going to be okay. But our body does not really care whether or not we feel calm and like things are going to be okay. It's tasked with our survival. And when it sees all of that GABA, it sees that as a vulnerability. if a leopard were to come around the corner, we could be too buzzed to care and we'd potentially be in danger. So it needs to restore homeostasis. And in the case of alcohol, it does that by converting the GABA to glutamate, an excitatory neurotransmitter. And I believe that GABA to glutamate conversion accounts for why, if we've had a few glasses of wine at dinner, in addition to the blood sugar crash that can create, around 2 or 3 in the morning, we wake up, heart racing, thoughts racing, and we proceed to toss and turn for the remainder of the night. And I think that's the glutamate effect. And so this doesn't necessarily mean you forego alcohol forever, but it can at least inform our choices. And one night it might feel like the act of self-love is to have the glass of wine. And another night we might think to ourselves, it's not worth it to me to squander my sleep tonight. I'm going to have the seltzer instead. When it comes to caffeine, putting the additives and sugar and fake sugars and bad quality dairy in your classic Frappuccino aside, which that one just I'm never going to co-sign. But caffeine itself in the form of coffee or tea is not an inherently bad substance. And in many ways, it's an inherently good substance. Coffee contains magnesium and antioxidants. Tea has polyphenols and antioxidants. We see coffee associated with decreased rates of Parkinson's disease. I think there's a lot to adjudicate in that data, but we have a lot of reason to think that this is a good medicine in the world. But that said, there's a lot of bioindividuality, and it has a long half-life. And half-life is this term we might vaguely remember from 10th grade chemistry, but basically how long it takes your body to metabolize half of the drug. And with caffeine, it's about 5 to 7 hours. And I just think we deserve to know that, because if we're having a coffee first thing in the morning, there's a pretty good shot that we've metabolized much of it by the time we're trying to fall asleep. But if we're having a cup of coffee at 3 p.m., it's effectively like we're having half of a cup of coffee around 9 p.m. And if we're someone who struggles with sleep, we wouldn't do that, but we're inadvertently doing that. So timing is critical. And I think the sweet spot for most of us is to consume caffeine around 90 minutes after waking. That's recognizing the fact that we get a little dose of cortisol endogenously when we wake up that can help us feel wakeful. I'll put an asterisk there, which is that many of us are like, no, I can't get out of bed without my coffee. And I think that's caffeine withdrawal. So you can slowly nudge your body's need for caffeine to 90 minutes after waking. And then that helps you really have that benefit of the caffeine during the workday. And by the time you're crashing, you should be probably wrapping up your workday. Whereas if we're having it first thing in the morning, a lot of us are starting to crash right around 3 in the afternoon. And then we're on a mad dash for another injection of caffeine, which then alters our sleep quality. And when it comes to the bioindividuality, we just have to be honest with ourselves. Some people are rapid metabolizers. They have a much greater tolerance for caffeine. And some of us are slow metabolizers. We're sensitive to caffeine. And if that's you, you just want to embrace that and work with it. And the fact is, part of the reason we love coffee, and we think of it as our one true friend in the world and our salvation, we're giving it a lot of credit for solving a problem it is actually originally responsible for, because we all wake up in caffeine withdrawal. And so nothing feels as good as scratching the itch of withdrawal with the withdrawn substance itself. And so just to bear in mind that if you want to make any changes with caffeine, it's a very real drug with a very real withdrawal, and you want to go very gradually.
I think you'll agree that there's a ton of science around sleep, and that even the little things like a nightcap or a coffee later in the day can have major effects on sleep quality. But how does all of our modern technology affect our sleep quality? What are all of our screens doing to our circadian rhythms? Up next, we'll explore the powerful links between the modern world, including our devices, light exposure, and more on our sleep quality. Let's think back for a moment to the way our ancestors used to spend their days. After a full day filled with outdoor time, movement, eating real, whole, minimally processed foods, the sun would go down and they would settle into a night's sleep. Obviously, things have changed pretty dramatically. So how is the modern world and our new technology impacting our sleep?
If you don't sleep, you're gonna crave the wrong food. You're not gonna want to exercise, and you don't want to socialize. So, and maybe when I'm tired, I just want to go to bed, and I want to eat ice cream, and I definitely don't want to exercise. So, I think getting enough sleep is so key, and sleep is so screwy in this culture because we basically have done everything we can to disrupt our sleep, and it may be one of the real reasons for chronic disease epidemic. And there was a book I read years ago called Lights Out. about the invention of the light bulb and how that was the beginning of the end for us. It just promoted so much dysregulation of our circadian rhythms and affected our metabolism in ways that we are beginning to understand.
I think things like perimenopausal and postmenopausal sleep, jet lag, and shift labor, which arguably are also related to the modern environment. These are separate categories, but for the most part, the ways that we're struggling with sleep has to do with the artificial light after sunset. And our circadian rhythm is cued by light. Our sleep-wake cycle is connected to our light exposure. And we have a part of our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's really the closest we have to an internal clock, but it's not connected to a satellite. It's connected to our eyes. And it's getting its information to know what time of day it is based on the light cues. And this was a foolproof system on the proverbial savanna of human evolution. We couldn't get this wrong. We were surrounded by light during the day. We were surrounded by darkness at night. This allowed us to be more cortisol predominant during the day and melatonin released in the evening, helping us get sleepy. So in certain ways, technology created this problem, and technology can also help solve this problem that we are getting the wrong light cues in modern life. So on the one hand, in the morning, if you live somewhere where it's really not light out, you don't have access to good sunshine, there are devices that can help with that. They're now making these glasses that put a little strip of blue light over your eyes, supposedly to mimic the experience of the bright daytime sky. We've had for a long time now the light boxes, where the clinical strength is 10,000 lux, and you're meant to sit about a foot away from it with your eyes open but not staring directly at the light source for a half an hour in the morning. And that is how you can really mimic sunrise, and that helps with seasonal affective depression, but it's also helpful for unipolar depression as well. I generally feel that I trust Mother Nature in many ways, and I think that even in an overcast day in a place like the Pacific Northwest, perhaps the fact that we're trying to mimic sunrise before the sun has risen, we're messing with a system that was intended to have a balance of yin and yang over the course of the year. And those balances are more extreme when we live at higher latitudes. But I think there's something to be said for the time in the year around the summer solstice as being somewhat of a more hypomanic time where you sleep a little bit less and have more energy. And of course, around the winter solstice, I call that hibernation time, where you do go to bed a little bit earlier, sleep in, and you're in sync with the seasons. But if your life doesn't work that way, these devices can be supportive. And then in the evening, there's a lot that we can do. To me, all of these adjustments are necessary but not sufficient. And so I have my computer set up on what's called flux or f.lux, which helps transition the screen to more orange quality light and dimmer as the day goes on. It's synced with the clock on your computer. On the phone, using something like night mode or night shift mode is helpful, and then wearing the blue blocking glasses. And I think all of these at least support our ability to live our lives, our modern lives, with our technology without such a strong signal of blue spectrum light suppressing our melatonin. But the one non-negotiable in my life, and what I encourage my patients to do, is at the very least to not bring their phones into the bedroom at night. The idea here is that when we keep our phone on our bedside table or clutched to our chest while we sleep at night, it's the last thing we look at before bed. We glance at it if we are up in the middle of the night. We look at it first thing in the morning, and it sets the tone for our day based on whatever notification pushed to the top of our screen. And when we're scrolling at night, we do have to be aware of the fact that we're living in the attention economy. Social media apps are ingeniously designed to not have a natural stopping cue. So we are scrolling endlessly. Nobody has ever said, oh, look, I got to the end of TikTok. Let me put my phone to the side and go to bed at this wholesome hour. So we scroll and we doom scroll, and we don't feel surrounded by the safety we need to feel to fall asleep. And all of this is detrimental to our sleep quality. So if you can, set up your charger somewhere else in your home, kiss your phone goodnight around 9 or 9:30 in the evening, like, phone, I love you, I'm going to miss you. And then you head into your bedroom without your phone, read something life-affirming, and go to bed.
The science is solid. I can't state enough how much human beings are influenced by light. In fact, that is the primary driver for our sleep or wake state, meaning bright light or shortwave blue light that's coming from electronic devices is a signal for wakefulness. There's literally a group of cells in the back of our retinas containing a protein called melanopsin. Those cells take in the signal stimulus for light and communicate directly to our brain's body clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The bright light exposure that we're getting at sort of non-natural times as a function of our modern environment is a signal to be awake. And unfortunately, our brain structure and programming isn't caught up to the technology. So when you're lying in bed at night looking at your phone, you tend to get a little bit hypnotized by that. And frankly, I'm guilty of that myself. Time passes by very quickly. You're getting that blue light exposure, and you're also getting kind of an emotional reaction to it too. There's doom scrolling, and then there's kind of flipping through things, looking for that little dopamine hit with like, oh, I didn't know that. And oh, take a look there. And oh, look what he's doing. So, all of these things combine to get you to bed later than you probably had wanted to. Plus, even if you don't have trouble getting to sleep, the short wavelength blue light can actually interfere with your sleep quality, causing little micro arousals during the night. And I've seen that numerous times in the sleep lab on sleep studies where we're measuring brain waves. So I can tell you with a great deal of confidence, yes, this is a thing.
Well, we've heard some incredibly interesting science and some practical advice on how to decrease the negative effects of modern technology on our sleep quality. Up next, we'll tie it all together with some great actionable next steps to enhance your sleep quality starting tonight. The Better Brain Blueprint is all about empowering you to lead a longer, better, happier, and healthier life. No matter your health history, you have the ability to improve your brain function right now by incorporating the information from this series into your daily life. This cutting-edge information just isn't available anywhere else. And that's why owning all of the expert interviews, the transcripts, and the supporting materials is so incredibly valuable. I highly recommend making the Better Brain Blueprint, along with the bonus materials, part of your family library. By making some simple lifestyle changes, you can create lasting improvements in your health and in your life. These changes may not only lower your risk for conditions like Alzheimer's and mood disorders, they will almost certainly improve your brain function right now. You might notice that you start thinking more clearly, forgetting less, and generally feeling better throughout the day. Sometimes the hardest part in taking action and making these lifestyle changes is figuring out where to start. If you're ready to start right now, the bonus materials include resources that will help you apply this knowledge to your life, one step at a time. We interviewed the world's leaders in general brain health, mood disorders, Alzheimer's disease, and more. And we received some fantastic actionable information from each of our experts. Unfortunately, we didn't have room to include it all in this series, but we know it's critical, life-changing information that has the power to transform your health. That's why the bonus materials also include the full-length interviews from all of the experts you've seen throughout this series. The great thing about owning this series is that you can easily share it with friends and family and watch their lives change too. In fact, if you found this series helpful, I invite you to share this broadcast event with a friend or with your loved ones. You just might change their lives and their destiny. The most important investment in your life is an investment in your health. Click the button on this page to invest in your Better Brain Blueprint today. Regardless of where in the world you are and what time it is, it's almost certain that in a matter of just a few hours, you're going to be settling in for sleep. So how can you make sure that you're doing everything you need to do to optimize and enhance the quality of those hours of shut-eye? Let's explore some of the most practical steps for getting the best sleep.
My favorite tips, again, is direct sunlight first thing in the morning. Most people have an alarm to wake up. I challenge everyone to have an alarm to go to sleep because your brain and your nervous system loves consistency. It loves those patterns, right? Even on the weekends, I know it's fun to stay out late, but know that if you're going to do that, just like eating that cupcake, that you're going to pay a little bit of a price, in your productivity and your performance and your peace of mind. So I'll be thinking about, for sleep, going to sleep at the same time, getting direct sunlight. And then just a reminder for everyone, when we're hunter-gatherers, we would know when it was time to go to sleep. There would be drop in two environmental factors: temperature and light, right? So sleeping in a colder, more cool, now where it's so cold, it's distracting, where you're shivering, but colder and a darker environment, that's that triggers your nervous system to be able to produce melatonin, which is the hormone that informs your rest of your body that it's time to relax, So don't be on your screens at night either, because that blue light fools your mind and the thing is still daylight, and you won't go to sleep.
Temperature regulation can really help you get into a good sleep pattern. So what we now know is that in order to fall asleep and stay asleep, our core body temperature needs to drop by 2 degrees. And it's funny, right? Because the reason why we wake up in the morning is because we get a rise in core body temperature, which then triggers a release of cortisol, which then triggers us to wake up, because cortisol is that stress, fight or flight hormone that gets released that wakes us up. Now, so if we know that, then we should know, if you reverse engineer that, then we don't want to be getting hot during the night. And it turns out that, some of the reasons why we wake up during the night is because we have an increase in core body temperature. So I've played around with many methods of, cooling down. It's really hot right now in New York City. I use the air conditioner, thermostat. I've got it set to 62 degrees currently, which is quite cold. Or I also sleep on a temperature controlled mattress. Now, let's just say that you don't want to sleep on a temperature controlled mattress, because what I'm talking about is thermal regulation. Instead of looking at ambient temperature, I'm talking about what can you do for your core body temperature to drop 2 degrees. And the best way to do that is through a temperature controlled mattress. But if you don't have one, some of the hacks that I have is sleep with your feet outside of the sheets. So then you can just expel the heat that goes through your body, and have your hands obviously outside of the sheets as well. But when in doubt, always try and sleep with the air conditioner turned down.
For someone who's laying in bed, struggling to fall asleep, I think the first thing to do is be aware that they're not really being successful fighting the brain with their brain. So this is kind of going to the idea that you can't really try harder to sleep. You can't will yourself to sleep. And when you find yourself in that loop, then it's worthwhile to just say, okay, I'm going to put a pause on this and do something different. And for people, that looks a number of different ways. But where emotions are concerned, sometimes it's easier to recognize those. And I like to ask, are you safe? And is there scarcity? If you're having those types of emotions, then you can sometimes do a reset by reassuring yourself, I am safe. I've done everything I'm able to over the course of the day. And now it's time for my rest. And that can help carve out a space for the important sleep that you're going to have ahead of you. Scarcity is another thing that kind of triggers that primitive instinct where, you don't have enough food, you don't have enough shelter, and sort of going through an exercise to highlight abundance, or just generating a feeling of abundance, thinking of a time when you had everything you need, or reassuring yourself that, in fact, currently you have everything you need, can help to soothe that agitation in your mind. If someone is dealing with a lot of thoughts ping-ponging in their brain, sometimes getting up and going into a different room in low light and just doing a brain dump onto paper can help a lot. What that does is it gives you some distance between the thoughts in your head and allows you to examine the thoughts, to really question, is this valid? Is this really reasonable? Because again, at the end of the day, your mind is going to throw up some very unusual thoughts and even catastrophize to the point of keeping you awake and alert. So these are a few tips to help. I do also like to take a bottom-up approach, which is engaging some parasympathetic techniques. You can do that with breathing. So you can take advantage of the sigh breath with a long exhale, and I'll demonstrate that. What it means is you take a big inhale and then another inhale on top of that and make a long exhale. So let me show you what I mean. And that is a signal to your brain that it's safe. So doing that for 10 times or so can really help soothe your mind and put you in a state with lower heart rate, lower agitation that's conducive to sleep.
You want to get 20 minutes of sunlight exposure in the morning without sunglasses. And you'd be outside. If you're, living in the Norway or something in the middle of winter, you might want a full spectrum light box in the morning to kind of reset your pineal gland and get the hormones sorted where your melatonin goes down and cortisol goes up, and you kind of reset the system. Second is making sure that your sleep hygiene is good, which means don't eat 3 hours before bed. Finish eating 3 hours before bed, so don't eat anything before you go to bed. Have the room be completely dark, like blackout shades. No light in the room. Cover all the little I don't know. So a hotel room, there's like lights everywhere. It's like the worst. Use eye shades if you need to. Should be super quiet. I think you can use earplugs if you need to. And make sure the temperature of the room is cold. It should be like probably between 65 and 68 degrees, which sounds really cold, but actually you sleep way better in the cold. Make sure you get off screens in a couple hours before. I use blue blocker glasses, which are really important to reduce the blue light stimulation, which activates your wakefulness and prevents melatonin production.
When bedtime rolls around, it's really ideal to have a wind down period. It's kind of like landing a plane. So there's systems and checks that need to be in place as the plane lands. And you can kind of picture that as a way for your mind to unwind, to reduce the stimulation, and to kind of prepare itself for sleep. So you want to look and try to eliminate stress from your bedtime routine as much as possible. I really suggest people take a look at the temperature that they're using for their bedroom, or even manipulate their body temperature, and also to reduce the light exposure at night. Keep the same bedtime routine, because that habit is going to reinforce the brain's preparation for sleep and make it more likely that you'll fall asleep when you want to. It also gives you some durability to know that if things go wonky from time to time, and believe me, even sleep docs suffer from insomnia every now and again. But, it gives you this idea that I have the substrate, I have the skills to pick my routine up and keep that trust with my sleep.
After hearing from our amazing experts, I hope you agree that sleep is absolutely one of the most important aspects of brain health, and that it makes sense to do everything we can to prioritize better sleep. One of the things I love about sleep science is that everyone feels better after just one night of good sleep. It's why building your day for better sleep tonight is such an incredible tool to rapidly enhance brain function and enjoy how it feels at the same time. So remember, whether you're cutting back on afternoon coffee, dropping the temperature in your bedroom, or decreasing your blue light exposure before bed, there are tons of straightforward tools at your disposal for better sleep. Finally, if you or someone you know is struggling with poor sleep, daytime sleepiness, or other significant sleep symptoms, think about asking your health provider for a sleep study. It can be an absolute game changer. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Better Brain Blueprint. I'm Dr. Austin Perlmutter, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next episode.